From the mediocrity of Wonder Woman 1984 to the god-awfulness of 2017's Justice League, there are plenty of hilariously bad DCEU projects that I could poke holes in. But today, I'm diving into the absolute worst DCEU movies that every fan hated. And I might as well start with Justice League, because wow, it relied on CGI more than Marvel does nowadays. And it's my contender for the worst DCEU film out there. I'm placing blame solely on Joss Whedon's shoulders, who made it into his version of what a DC Avengers would look like, but for 10-year-olds. I'm not going to blame Zack Snyder, because he was going through something terrible a few months before the movie's release. His daughter had died by suicide, and he left production to be with his family. So Warner Bros. Decided to hire Joss to complete the movie, and he completely ditched Snyder's original version. He wrote nearly 80 new pages of screenplay, which roughly translates to 80 minutes of footage that he had to shoot in just a few weeks. Remember the scenes where Flash escorts the Russian family to safety? That was entirely Joss's idea, and in my opinion, it bloated an already CGI-heavy, nonsensical movie. It's tonally uneven, with subplots that literally don't go anywhere or add to the atmosphere, and Batman's just sort of there. I've watched the entire movie 3 times, and I can't figure out what he did or what difference he made in the overall story. In fact, he does more in the Snyder Cut than he ever did in this movie. And it just goes to show you that if you want to do a DCEU marathon, just watch the Snyder Cut instead of the theatrical one. You'll thank me for it. Oh, and the fact that I haven't even mentioned Henry Cavill's CGI upper lip yet just proves the messy, uneven awfulness of Whedon's Justice League. Anyway, I'll do a full breakdown of exactly why it sucked so much, because there's a lot to nitpick. But now, let's dive into something that was slightly better: Wonder Woman 1984. And I say slightly because it could have been a lot better. There are plot conveniences which leave audiences thinking, so Diana appeared because a fight scene needed to happen? And don't even get me started on the random wall in the desert. Like, I get that Maxwell Lord has the ability to grant any wish you could possibly imagine, but come on, a wall materializing out of nowhere makes no sense, even for Wonder Woman. Anyway, speaking of Maxwell Lord, Pedro Pascal was probably the best thing about this movie. It looked like he had a blast playing the villain. It's genuinely enjoyable to watch him flip out, break down, or laugh hysterically. Pedro took the role and made it his own, although the writing for the character was a bit one note. Yes, he's a dangerous villain who only wants power and has a son he cares about, but that's a stereotypical definition for a villain from the 80s. His motivations aren't as fleshed out or as meaningful as someone like Eric Killmonger from Black Panther, you know? Other than that, there's the hilariously bad Barbara Minerva, or Cheetah. Kristen Wiig did the best she could with the material she had, and her goofy, nerdy personality is genuinely likable. But having her as a secondary villain bloated the runtime of the movie, and she was written quite poorly too. In fact, it's hard to differentiate between Cheetah and Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The characters have awfully similar motivations, and their character arcs are nearly identical. Everyone ignores their existence, and they're like the black sheep of the workplace. And both of them seek power above all else. Worst of all, though, is the fact that Patty Jenkins dropped the ball. Look, writing a sequel is challenging for any filmmaker worth their salt, especially when the original earns a 93 on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience expectations are through the roof. But after watching Wonder Woman 84, it feels like the screenplay wasn't ready to be filmed. Instead of focusing on Diana's journey through the 1980s and creating a meaningful story about her growth as a superhero, it features a muddled plot that suffers from odd tonal shifts. There's comedy where there doesn't need to be, and there are action sequences that seem to come out of nowhere. It feels disingenuous and kind of falls flat, especially when you consider that the original blended action, adventure, romance, and comic relief by rooting it in Diana's journey. Anyway, since I just mentioned Suicide Squad, I might as well dive into it next. And it was a hot mess right from the get-go. Viola Davis, Will Smith, and Margot Robbie's performances might be the only thing that it made fans forget just how nonsensical the plot is. They carried the movie on their backs. And I've got to give a shout out to Viola Davis, because she made Amanda Waller such a believable villain that you forget that the character is kind of an idiot on paper. Watch the movie again and forget that it's an Academy Award winner Viola Davis playing the role. Waller in this movie isn't a great strategist, and she's certainly more trusting of supervillains than I would be. Anyway, the worst offender was the movie's overly confusing plot. Enchantress summoning her brother Incubus to destroy mankind sounds like a great story until you watch the movie. Both Enchantress and her brother are more CGI than actual fleshed out characters. They don't have any urgency, their motivations are paper thin, and their decisions are idiotic. I could have made this entirely about Jared Leto's over-the-top bad performance as the Joker, but that would have been too easy. In fact, you could cut Joker out of the entire movie and it wouldn't affect the plot one bit. It wouldn't make the movie any better either, because there are just too many things wrong with it. And this brings me to the Ultimate Edition of Batman vs. Superman. The theatrical cut is arguably worse, but at least with the Ultimate Edition, you get more sensible storytelling. And I use that term loosely because there isn't a lot to love about it. For example, what was Lex's plan once Doomsday killed Superman? Just let him loose on the world? Well, that doesn't make sense for his character. And why can Bruce suddenly peer into the future? Because there needs to be some sort of exposition, and the writers don't know how to show it in a way that makes sense for Batman. And then there's the overall plot itself, where the movie asks audiences whether superheroes are actually doing any good. The opening shot of Superman fighting General Zod shows the devastation from a ground level, and I really loved that. Bruce Wayne running into the fray and a cloud of smoke eating him up was a brilliant shot and sets up an important narrative arc, but it gets forgotten as soon as the movie starts. The movie wants you to question Batman's vigilantism and whether he's really the good guy in all of this. And yet the warehouse fight sequence is designed to make you cheer for him. The movie wants you to think about the incredible devastation superpowered gods like Superman can cause. And then it shows you a fight between him and Doomsday and wants you to cheer him on. You see, there's nothing wrong with a superhero movie where two gods are fighting each other in a massive battle. But if you're gonna make us question the nature of superheroes, you better have a point to make.
I'll take you in without breaking you, which is more than you deserve.
And now, you will fly to him.
So yeah, it has some great action set pieces and a tad more CGI than I would have hoped. But ultimately, it's a subpar DC movie that annoyed fans like me. And that's all I have for this video. There were others to pick from, but these movies were the worst of the bunch. I'll see you in the next one.